I am so
This
happy.
meeting is being recorded.
I'm so happy to turn this show over to Pat T. So go ahead, Pat. It's your meeting.
Barb, thank you so much. And you know what, I love the Bronx format. I love your AA group. If I was, this is international, it's great on Zoom, but I'm telling you, I think you guys rock. I've had a chance to be with you guys a lot over the years, and I met you guys through COVID. And thank you so much for what you guys are doing for the fellowship, what you're doing for recovery. Barb and all you guys, it means the world. I really mean that. Thank you. I'm Pat. I'm an alcoholic. I'm recovered. And I'm not recovered from everything. I'm recovered mentally and physically. On a spiritual basis, I am growing and understanding and effectiveness the rest of my life with God that invaded my life through this program. I want to give you a quick background. When God struck me sober in July the 9th, 2002. So I just celebrated 21 years, and my wife, who has almost 31 years, laughs at me and calls me a whippersnapper, but I don't care. Every day that I am not drinking, every day that I'm not being a train wreck and a tire fire in people's lives, I thank God from the bottom of my heart. I truly mean that. When I came into AA, I had given up on God. Does anybody in here relate to that? Anybody here have an attitude that, you know what, maybe God's around, but there's just no power in God for my life? God just doesn't seem to be interested in helping me. God doesn't seem to be interested in making a difference in my life. And I'm not smacking on God. I'm just saying that he's got bigger things to do. He's got universes to create and galaxies to manage and everything like that. And little old me just isn't a priority for him. And so by the time I came in here, I'd been asking God for 10 years. My last run started in 1991, and it didn't end until 2002. And it was a torturous 10 years. I went through 2 marriages. I lost my health. I lost my business. I lost my kids. I lost a lot of stuff. But I lost myself. I felt like I lost my soul. There was nothing left of me. I was hard-hearted. But there was something in me that wanted to live just a smidge more than I wanted to commit suicide. And so a therapist who I've been seeing for 3 years said, you know what, Pat, no one can pronounce another person an alcoholic. And she did, the rare moments when I would meet with her, I'd be sober, which was sort of a Herculean task to do. But the bottom line is she 12-stepped me, the same kind of 12-step that I received from my high school coach when I was 17 years old. And I didn't get sober till I was 43. So you sort of have to look at this stuff and go, what the heck? And the grace of God keeping me alive, the grace of God doing what God does, I wasn't searching for and I wasn't seeking out. And the only thing I wanted God to do was to stop me from drinking. I didn't want him to necessarily change my life or my belief systems or what I did with my time. I just wanted relief from what was going on. So I get in here and I hear you guys and ladies telling me that if you'll do what we've done, you'll never have to feel like you felt ever again. And I thought, okay, seems like a reasonable thing. And I look up on the wall, guys, and I see those 12 steps, and I just about pooped. I mean, I'll keep it nice and in mellowed words here, but when I saw the God stuff on the wall, my heart sank. I mean, it didn't get encouraged, it sank, because I was thinking to myself, I said, I've been asking God to strike me sober for 10 years. And I asked this guy, I said, are you telling me that this whole program is about finding a relationship with God, that God is the answer, that this 12 steps is just sort of a ruse and it's all about God? And the guy looked with me, had a wink in his eye, and he was a retired hockey player back when they didn't have masks, and he was a goalie. So I think he got hit a few times. So he probably was seeing stars in his eyes for the rest of his life. But he looked at me and he said, yeah, young fella, it is. And I didn't know Buddy very well at the time, but he introduced me to the possibility that God could do something for me that I couldn't do for myself. And thus began my journey. I wasn't open to God. I can't tell you that I was. When I first came in, I was not open to God. I was just going to learn your steps. I was going to learn what it was, and I was going to try to put my life back together because I figured if I could just quit drinking, everything got good. And the exact opposite happened. And that happens for most of us alcoholics. When we quit drinking, if we don't have a solution, according to Don P., it's cruelty. If I don't have a solution in my life, it's cruelty. And I didn't have a solution. All I was doing was not drinking. And that was a miracle, by the way, because I couldn't put a sober day together. So that was a miracle in itself, but I did not feel any better emotionally, psychologically, relationally. It was all still a tire fire. And so I'm going, if this is the answer to be in this fellowship and go to meetings, and I was going to 3 meetings a day for my first year of sobriety because I couldn't work. I was going, 90 meetings, 90 days. No, I was going to 90 meetings and whatever, divide by 3 in 30 days, right? So I was confused and I didn't know, and I was scared to death because I've been trying one way or another to try to figure out this God thing for a long time. I gave my life to God when I was 17 years old, trying to quit drinking. And it worked for 5 months. And then I started picking up again. And then it was game on for the rest, till a long time, till I was 43. And so they tell me that you have to have God. And then they start to introduce to me, Pat, going to the fellowship's not enough. You got to read this book. You got to turn statements into questions. You got to learn this book. You got to go through these steps. And if you don't do this, you're going to die. You're not going to catch recovery like a cold. You're going to walk through our work. You're going to do what is necessary through these 12 steps. And then the miracle happens. You will have a vital spiritual experience. You will have a spiritual awakening. You will have an entire psychic change. It is a promise. It's a foregone conclusion, Pat. You can't avoid it. God will do it, but you got to cooperate. And the cooperation is you're going to read these 164 pages with us, and you're going to go through these steps, and you're going to have considerations on each step. You're going to have questions to answer and reflect with yourself, and you're going to have to get honest. And I said, I don't know how to get honest. I haven't been honest in 20 years. I don't even know what honesty is. If it bit me in the butt, I'd probably be surprised. And he said, don't worry about it. Do you have a desire to be honest? And I said, yeah, I got a desire to be honest because I don't want to die. See, we have to be pretty badly mangled. I mean, the bottom line is the book uses some words. I just wrote down a few words before I got here. Bill describes it as we have quicksand. We'd stretch out and all stretch out around me, quicksand, this bitterness of the bitter morass of self-pity. We were beaten into reasonableness. We had to be badly mangled before we could get help. The idea had to be smashed into our head. Half measures resulted in nil. We have a fatal illness. We have a gravely ill illness. We have a sense of hopelessness. God, in Dr. Silkworth's story, he's talking to a man and says, I must stop, but I cannot. You must help me. And Dr. Silkworth didn't have any answers. There's a desperation of a drowning man that Carl Jung talks about with Rowan Hazard, flimsy reed, and it turns out to be the loving and powerful hand of God. Chronic alcoholics are doomed. The remorse and horror and hopelessness are unforgettable the next morning. Our minds race for the terrible sense of calamity impending, heart failure during the DTs, wet brain if we drank too much, being locked up into the asylum. That's some of the descriptors that they use in this room. This disease is fatal. And there is a part of me in a very, very visceral level that knew that this disease was killing me and I couldn't stop it. You guys remember the day when you realized you already knew that the allergy of the body had you and you couldn't control how much you drank, but then you had this thing about the obsession. And when you're stone cold sober, you can't stay away from the drink no matter how badly you want to, and no matter how well you know your triggers, and no matter how many treatment centers you've gone to, and no matter how many therapists have told you how this is the way out, you can't stay away from the drink. And there's this terror that comes over us and goes, my gosh, this disease is going to kill me and I have no choice. There's a loaded gun placed in my hand and my fingers on the trigger, and there's a force beyond my control pulling the trigger ever so gently, ever so firmly against where it's going to dislodge and shoot me right in the head. I'm overwhelmed. It's a devastating blow. I have no hope. And so when Bill Wilson, and see this whole thing about forming this relationship with God, the reason I go into such detail about this right off the top is that Bill was not looking for God, folks. Bill Wilson was not looking to form a relationship with God. If you look at his first 9 pages of his story, there's not a whole lot of God talk at all in his story. Even at the end, there is no God talk from Bill Wilson. Bill was doing everything that his amazing, brilliant mind could do, his willpower beyond measure. He became the #1 man in just about everything he tried. But he had no God. He wasn't looking for God. He wasn't looking for a rescue hand. He wasn't looking for the loving and powerful hand of God to pull him out of a drowning. All he knew is he was in quicksand and he was dying and everything was dark. Can you relate to where Bill's at? That's where we're at. And that's why I love this program. Because you know what? It's not meant for the churchgoer necessarily. It's meant for the person who's maybe tried God and God didn't work and swears off the idea about God. See, Bill is going to tell us, and we're going to get into it in detail today. Bill's going to tell us about how he journeyed from an impersonal God experience that was no power to a personal God relationship that was loving and overwhelming power that changed his life. That's what Bill is going to do for us in pages 9 through 16. And then he is going to lovingly take us through in We Agnostics how the rest of us who are gun shy with this whole conversation about spirit, God, higher power, and we're going, listen, I'm tired, I'm worn out, I've tried this stuff, it doesn't work, I don't know why you keep beating me over the head with this God stuff. Come on, just give me some practical ways I can not drink. Just give me some practical, I'll do these step things, and I'll sort of speed bump over this God stuff. How about we just get down to the real stuff? And see, the funny thing is, I live in a delusion that life is okay enough just being sober. And we see them in the rooms of AA. People that are 5, 10, 2, 20, 30, 40 years sober. And you hear this tragic statement. I don't know much about God. And I don't even know if I believe in God. And they might be 30 or 40 years sober, but at least I'm not drinking today. Folks, that's not the message, and that's not the promise of the big book. The message of the big book is they're holding out a light in a freezing blizzard storm, and there's a light in the barn, and I'm out in the prairie, and I am dying. My feet feel like they're frostbitten. I don't have any mittens. My face is frostbitten. My clothes are wet. I am worn out. It's dark of night. The wind is chilling me to the bones, and I see this light in this barn. And the light in the barn is this big book of Alcoholics Anonymous that says, come on in. If you'll do what we've done, you're going to form a vital relationship with God that's going to change everything about your life. And they summarized it for us. On page 25 of the book, they talk about this great fact that everything about how I view life, how I view you, how I view God, how I view myself is going to radically change, and I had nothing to do with it. And then the central fact of my life is that I'm going to experience consciously the presence of God. I'm going to experience consciously the presence of God, and God, of my understanding, which, by the way, we make a big deal of that, but what other understanding of God do I have? I only have my own understanding of God, right? It's not like, I can say what you want. We might get our source material about how we believe in God from a lot of places, but at the end of the day, it's between God and me what God allows me to believe and not believe. And it's a journey. And so what happens is, in the central fact that says God's going to do miracles in my life the more I obey. And the more I obey what I believe is the will of God in my life, I'm going to experience the power of God in my life. God, I pray for the knowledge of your will and the power to carry it out. Wow, that's amazing. And Bill this developing a relationship with God is a journey. And sometimes it's not linear. It's just not. The steps are linear, but this journey with God is infinite. God is powerful. God can do whatever God wants to do whenever he wants to do it with our hearts. And the coolest thing that Bill's going to talk to us about is that the idea of God has always been poured into our hearts even before we were born. God's our creator. We hear about that in third step. We hear about that in the seventh step. God is the creator. He's our creator. Everything in Billy and Chris and Sean's and Summers and Mark and everybody on this call, God custom designed you. You are not a mistake. You are not a throwaway kid. You are precious. And God goes to the end of the earth to show that. And I'm going to get into the book text here in just a second, but I got to tell you this. God pursues us way before we pursue God. God doesn't wait over in some ivory chair and say, well, when he finally shows enough interest in me. I mean, I know what it says at the end of the one chapter. It says when we disclose we disclose ourselves to God, God discloses himself to us, and we're going to talk about that text. But the bottom line is God's pursuing us way before we ever pursue God. Think about your sobriety date. Did you have this big love affair going on with God, this vital connection and conscious contact with God when you got sober? If you did, that's wonderful. That wasn't my experience. I didn't have any God consciousness at all. And yet God loves us enough that he does this stuff. See, the whole big book is a love story from God to you and me. That's what it is. It's a love story. And God is gentle with us because he knows that we're broken people. God is gentle with us because he knows we're lonely. God is gentle with us because he knows that we are overly sensitive about anything about God. He knows that we're prejudiced. He knows that we have ideas that are just like stuck in us like a tick on our skin, sucking the life out of us. And we won't let loose of. Bill calls it that icy intellectual mountain. And we know that the icy intellectual ideas we have that are limited us from God aren't even helping us. They're not. But the insanity is we hold on to them. The insanity is we hold on to old ideas that aren't working about our God concept. And we're too scared, too stubborn. I don't know, all the above for me. You see, when I started thinking about if God's the answer, then I got really scared because I go, God, I tried you and you didn't show up. I don't know what to say. I don't think you're going to work. I don't think it's going to happen for me. See, that's a scary thought. It's not going to happen for me. I'm going to reach out to God. I'm really going to try this thing. And I'm the unique one in the room. It's going to happen for all you guys, but it's not going to happen for me. That's a scary thought. And I'm going to never get out of this loneliness. I'm never going to get out of this terror that I call my life. My life is a tire fire. And I have insanity going on in my physical body with the disease of alcoholism. I got insanity going on in my mind, this mental obsession. I got the insanity of unmanageability and untreated alcoholism, present day agnosticism. I can't make sense out of my relationships. I can't make sense out of my emotions. I wake up in the morning to 12 voices all tell me I'm a piece of garbage and that I should just shoot myself now. Don't ever taint anybody else's life. Just get out of there. Leave people alone. You are a disaster. You don't even deserve to breathe. Anybody else have those kind of things? You're never going to be the father. You're never going to be the mother. You're never going to be the brother, the sister, the partner you want to be. You're a joke. You're never. And we have this endless tape going off in our heads that's killing us. And God, who we're going to meet in this program, is going to say, that's not true, Pat. What you're hearing in your head is not truth. It's an illusion. It's not true. And so where I'm going with that, it's just sort of, I don't know, it's basic in one sense, but the illusion that I can live without a vital and active, intimate relationship with God is not true. Bill never meant us to live that way. The delusion that not drinking for the rest of my life is enough is not true. We try that on in early sobriety without a solution. We just about want to shoot ourselves already. And then the new obsessions, if we're lucky enough to stay away from the drink and God has separated us from the drink and he stands between us and the drink, we know that. He's removed the problem. If we're doing this work, it doesn't even exist for us. But the new obsession pops up this ugly head. How does that show up? Well, it shows up in sex, money, porn, food, people. It's an equal opportunity vicious killer of our souls, just like alcohol was. Would you agree? Anybody had those kind of struggles after you got sober? Come on. We all, I mean, maybe not all of us, but I'll tell you what, it's vicious. And our self-will takes us to places we don't want to go. And so on page 29, enough of the introduction there. I know we've talked about it a lot, but the promise before we go on to page 29 is this. We can be rocketed in the fourth dimension of existence. We could be like Ebby and have something different about our eyes. There's a glow in our spirit. We can be like Ebby. We could be like Bill, where there's a new relationship with our creator that we actually start calling our creator, our power greater than ourselves, our new found friend. Folks, when I came in here, I didn't have friends. I didn't have anybody that wanted to be around me. My first sponsor, when he was really taking me through the work, we were talking about the bedevilments. He said, so tell me about your personal relationships. You have any troubles with those? I go, nope. And he looked at me, sort of raised his eyes, and he goes, Pat, I know your story. What do you mean you don't have any trouble with relationships? Well, I don't have any. My kids don't talk to me. My ex-wives don't talk to me. My business partners won't talk to me. No, I don't have any trouble at all with relationships. You know, and so we're jammed up. We're jammed up there. But it says that we're going to have a new relationship with our creator, and we're going to have a friendship with God. Do we understand that God wants to hang out with us? When you go to bed at night, God is tickling your toes saying, I've got you. I got you safe and protected tonight. When you wake up in the morning, God's at the foot of the bed saying, oh, I'm so glad you're awake. I cannot wait to show you what we have in store today. Can't wait. And folks, the way I feel about God today and what's been poured into my heart by God is nothing short of a miracle, because this was not how I was 21 years ago. See, if we're open to letting God do what God does, we're going to grow into this incredibly loving and fun and exciting and challenging and sometimes fearful and scary and sometimes overly pressured, like, oh my gosh, crazy. But God's with us through it all. See, God's in everything. Everything comes our way. Every relationship we go into, God has a thing. He has something going on. See, we become his intelligent agents, his spearheads of his ever-advancing creation. God creating God's stuff using you and me on a daily basis. When we get to serve God as a purpose in step 8 and 9 for the rest of our lives, that's the purpose of our lives now. I know, spoiler alert, we are being saved not for us to have warm and comfy, cozy feelings for ourselves. It's to be of service to God and the people about us. Why? Because God knows how he made us, and he made us to be givers. He didn't make us to be takers. We fill up with God so that God could use us more and more and more with other people as we go through this world. We have this new relationship with him. He's our newfound friend. He's the Father of light. I was in darkness for so long, I didn't even know what light looked like. And when light finally sort of pricking through my dark curtain of my life, it was hard to look at. I was sort of, the light was hard on my eyes. You know how when when you first wake up and somebody turns the light on and you go, easy on that. Well, it's the way it is with God and with us. When God starts shining light on truth in my life and my limitations and my powerlessness, I get scared. Because I think it's when he shows me that I don't have power in an area of my life, that's going to be my responsibility to fix that lack of power. And he goes, no, Pat, just relax. I want to show you the truth about your life because I love you. You've been trying to run life without me. I'm going to show you what it looks like as far as the truth behind your life. You're going to have a step 3 experience. You're going to have a step 4 experience. You're going to have a step 5 experience. And you're going to find out that living for yourself is a self will run riot. And you are going to be a tire fire in everybody's life that you touch. I talked to you about that in the alcoholic illness on page 18. I said, you can't do life on your own. You annihilate every good relationship that you could ever touch. When we trust God, relationships become rich and vital and loving and caring and overwhelmingly positive. That's my experience. I'm not talking theory. All 3 of my children are back in my life in a vital way. My son is flying cross country this next week to spend time with his pop for 4 days, taking business holiday to spend time with me. And he called me up last night and says, Dad, I want to play a round of golf. And I know you don't play golf, but will you ride with me? My son wants me to ride with him, to be with him. When I came in here, my son said, I never want to see your miserable face again. What you did to me, what you did to my mom, I never want to see you again ever. And gosh, he was serious. It took 3 years of amends, 3 different times, to finally have a relationship with my son. Was it worth it? Oh my gosh. Because God was in the midst of that conversation. You know why? Because we get honest. We let the Father of light shine light on us. See, this isn't about me constructing this big God concept. It's about experiencing God. God will reveal the concept of who God is. God's bigger than my mind. Don't worry about it. Wherever you start is good enough. Isn't that what the book says? If I'll lay aside prejudice, if I'll just lay aside prejudice of spiritual terms, spiritual expressions, and be open to the possibility, Pat, of what they mean to you. And that's what my sponsor asked me. He said, Pat, what do these spiritual terms mean to you? When I say God, what happens? He said, well, and I didn't want to say this out loud to Bill T, my sponsor. I said, Bill, it makes me want to throw up. When you say God, I want to throw up. When you say prayer, I want to run away. When you say meditation, I go, yeah, I could get down with some meditation because I'm in control. I can manipulate that. That sounds pretty good. I like that meditation thing. He said, well, what if the meditation isn't about you trying to manipulate God and get what you want, but it was for you to get connected to God and hear what God wants for you? Well, I don't know. Interesting thought. Don't know. I guess I better be open to it. And he smiled. He goes, yeah, you better be open to it. Isn't God good? Wherever we are, and you're experiencing fellowship in the rooms of AA, and you're hearing people's testimony, and you're hearing people's witness, how their life is changing, God's using that in each one of our lives to whisper in our ears, I love you. I love you. See, an impersonal God has no power in our lives. Bill Wilson had a belief in God. Let's just look at it. You know, the whole purpose of these stories on page 29, it says, it shows how these people formed the relationship with God. Each individual, page 29, second paragraph, in their personal stories, describes in their own language, from their own point of view, how they established the relationship with God. Didn't say how they went to church or temple. Didn't say how they went to a holy place. It said how they established a relationship with God. And Bill tells us later on, deep down inside of us, is the fundamental idea of God. For folks, I believe this to the bottom of my heart, that God has poured God deep down in our hearts. And he says, I'm going to wake you up to the great reality, me in you, which is your hope. And if you open the door just a smidge, Pat, because I'm not going to barge through what you want to do, but if you will open the door a smidge, I will revolutionize your life. I will show you things about you. I will show you things about other people. I will show you things about what it looks like to live life to the max, like you can't even fathom. Folks, if I told you about the stuff that God has been doing in my life for the last 21 years, you'd sit there and you'd say, that can't be true, Pat. You're delusional. You're just laughing. You're lying to me. But it's true. From relationship to, and this isn't about getting. You know what the most important thing is in my life today? It's what page 51 says, The consciousness of the presence of God is the single most important thing in my life. The intimate, radical, powerful, passionate, loving, sacrificial love that God has for me, sacrificing everything to reach me when I didn't want to be reached. When I was spitting in God's face and he's wiping it off, he says, I love you. When I'm hitting him over the head, when I'm hitting him straight on with my ugly contempt about who I think he is and what I think he hasn't done, and he takes the blow and he says, I love you anyway. There's nothing you can do that can stop me from loving you. Nothing. And that's what Bill fell in love with. It wasn't theology. It wasn't religion. It wasn't a church. It was watching a man that he knew from his childhood, Ebby Thatcher, be changed. Good Lord, Ebby, you got sober. How do you get this done? I got religion, Bill. And in the original conversation, what it really said is I gave my life to Jesus. It's an Oxford group movement. And if we have a reaction to the word Jesus, Bill did too. Because on page 11 of the big book, Bill starts to think and consider, what does Christ mean to me? Now, I'm not trying to convert anybody here, but I think it's noteworthy that Bill Wilson in his story spends a paragraph considering what he thought Christ was. It might be worth a consideration. Whatever our belief system is, and my sponsors, I saw the word Christ and I got to tell you, that just didn't do it for me. You know, I could hear Muhammad fine. I could hear Allah fine. I could hear anybody else fine. But there's something about this word Jesus that, it just got me. It just, and I think there's some spiritual truth behind that. It's beyond our conversation today. But here's the thing. My sponsor, smart guy, said, Pat, what does Christ mean to you? Bill had to consider it. Why don't you consider that? That's enough about that for right now, but I just want to put that out there. So the purpose of stories is to how we form a relationship with God. Now, turn over to page 9 of the big book. We'll look at Bill's story for a little bit. Bill says, in the halfway down the page, it says, Ebby looks at me straight on. He says simply and smilingly, I got religion. Bill's reaction was, oh, wonderful. Hey, Ebby, that's so good. I'm so glad. That is wonderful. No. You know what? Bill's drunk. And Bill looks at Ebby. And the only word he comes up with here, he says, I was aghast. I think that was pleasantry words for him, probably saying a few choice words to Ebby, saying, what the are you talking about? Are you kidding me? So that's it. Now you're cracked up about religion. Then he goes on, but then Bill said a crazy thing. He said, Ebby didn't do any ranting or preaching at me. Reader, you know what Ebby did for me? He loved me enough to just simply tell me his experience with a God event in his life. And there was something about the way he was talking that I was interested. In fact, we talked for hours. And then he talked to me about some concepts of God, and I could remember my own life. I could remember my grandfather, who was not buying organized religion at all and would watch these tent meetings go on in my early days, in the contempt for some church folk and their doings, page 10, and his insistence that the spheres really had their music, but his denial of the preacher's right to tell him how he must listen, his fearlessness as he spoke these words just before he died. These recollections welled up from the past. They made me swallow hard. So, like it or not, when we're developing a relationship with God, it's going to be sometimes uncomfortable, because we're going to be considering things that we thought we neatly tucked away a long time ago and had done away with. And God's going to bring up things in our hearts, unique to each one of us, that is going to cause us to sort of, react. And that's okay. See, this God experience, God's a big believer in truth. Pat, just tell me your truth. What do you consider about this? Where are your sticking points? Next paragraph. Bill says, here's my current consideration of who I think God is. Page 10. I had always believed in God, a power greater than myself. And by the way, the word P there is capitalized where it shouldn't be capitalized. That's code for God. Okay. I don't want to overwhelm people here on that, but the words are used. If you're not using the word higher power, which is used twice in the big book, and I don't take away from that. I think it's beautiful. I think it's beautiful. But he's also saying here that he's talking about a personal pronoun, a personal noun, God, power. I'd often pondered these things. I wasn't an atheist. Few people really are. Blind proposition that the universe originated in a cipher and aimlessly rushes nowhere. That's an interesting thought. I had to think about that. Well, if you believe in the Big Bang, Pat, well, then who created the bang for the Big Bang? I don't know. Well, if you believe that, there's possibility of, matter and all this kind of stuff for how long? Well, who created matter? Somebody was behind the matter that was created. You got me there. Come on, quit hitting me with the facts. No, just back off. Let me think about this a little bit. And so, this isn't an intellectual exercise. I'm not trying to make it into one. But Bill's considering his engineering kind of mind, his conceptual mind. What does he think God is? Well, here's what he came up with. He likes the chemists. He likes the intellectual heroes. He likes the astronomers. He likes the evolutionists. And he simply says, you know what? I do observe that in life, there's some vast laws and forces at work. Now, we won't go into the detail, but just think about nature. Would you agree that there's some order behind nature? Would you agree that there's some order around do you realize that this planet was a mile closer to the sun in its orbiting structure, always a mile closer, that we would be burned up and we wouldn't exist? It was a mile further away, we would freeze out and die. And that orbit wobbles, but it's always within the realm of where it needs to be. How did that even happen? Who's behind gravitational forces, all that kind of stuff. The point is this: Bill's looking at nature, and he says, you know what? I see some vast laws and rhythm. I see some vast laws and forces behind it. And then he says, I had little doubt that there's mighty purpose and rhythm underlaying all. So he saw some beauty in life. Rhythm, it implies beauty, doesn't it? There's some rhythm. There's some rhythm to the seasons. There's some rhythm to the birth of flowers and the flowering of flowers, and then the full season, and then the fall with the changing of leaves, and then the summer, the winter. There's some rhythm in life. Even the music, the wind that whistles through the trees is beautiful. And he goes, there's a mighty purpose and rhythm underneath all. In fact, he says, I believe that there's probably some precise and immutable, unchangeable law. And I can't deny there's some intelligence behind it. And so I'm going to call this intelligence, this underlying rhythm of all, this mighty purpose with vast laws and forces that has beauty and timelessness. He says, I'm going to call it the spirit of the universe. And I'm even going to say that it's outside of time and it doesn't have any limitations. Wow. I don't know about you, but that's a pretty big God concept in my mind. That's bigger than anything I had when I came in here. It really was. I think Bill gave it a lot more thought than I ever did. Isn't it interesting? If you see somebody who's been sober for a long time, but they didn't have a God experience going on, they spend a whole lot of time in the steps, but no time in consideration who God is to them. I think God calls us to spend time with him to consider who we say he is. No, he's outside of time. He's outside of limitations, but Bill says, you know what? But that's as far as I could get. Here's what he's experiencing. He's experiencing an impersonal God of intellectual belief, and there's absolutely no power. He has no power in this relationship with God. There is no power to change his life. There's no power to help him put down the drink. There's no power for him to experience a renewed relationship with Lois, his wife. There's no power for him to get back respect at his office. There's no power for him to repair the damage of his past. There's no power in this current belief that remove shame and guilt and remorse and contempt and judgment of himself. There's no power that he's experiencing that could do that. Remember what he says, bitter morass, stretched out, this quicksand stretched out in all directions, this bitter morass of self-pity. Bill has all this intellectual knowledge of God, but no power of God. Isn't that what page 45 is all about in the big book? Lack of power, that's my dilemma. I had to find a power by which I could live, and that power has got to be bigger than me. Of course it does. And Bill says this power has got to be big enough to solve all my problems. It can't be just a little bit of a problem. It's got to be my living problem. And then he goes on a quest. Page 10, the very bottom, he says, the ministers in the world's religions, they parted right there. They talk about a God personal to me and the love, superhuman strength and direction. I became irritated. My mind snapped shut against such a theory. His first touch of a loving and powerful and caring and intimately intentional God into the detail of our lives, his reaction was not good. Many times my God experience today, as I grow with God, my first touch when God is introducing something new to me is not good. I don't go, wow, God, that is such a cool idea. You want me to change this part of everything in my life. You want to change it, use your power in me, and you want me to give permission. You want to do everything with my time now, God. How cute. You want to be in charge of my time and how I spend it. Oh, what a joy. That sounds wonderful. God, you want to be in charge of how I do relationship. You want me to pray every day for the knowledge of your will and the power to carry it out and to be loving and tolerant and patient and kind to my wife. What a joy. You know what? When I first hear God ideas, sometimes I don't react. I react like Bill. I get irritated. My mind snaps shut. If I'm being real with God, God says, bring it on, Pat. Tell me what you're really thinking. I already know what you're thinking in your heart, but you don't know what you're thinking in your heart. Tell me about it. When you look at my journal on a daily basis, I have God discussion where I'm going, God, I want you to smite this person. I want you to put this guy in the ground. And I'll even bring the truck over and I'll fill up the hole. Don't worry about it, God. It'll be on my time. I'll take care of it. I want to put this guy in the ground. I want to cover it over. That's what I want to do. No, God, I don't want to face the limits in my powerlessness in my relationship. I want to run away. That's what I want to do. I want to run away. I don't want to talk. I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to tell you I'm vulnerable. I don't want to tell you I'm weak. I don't want to tell you anything. Oh, wait, God, you want me to say that to you, don't you? And I'm saying it. God, I'm having an experience with you. I'm telling you the truth. I'm vulnerable. I'm weak. I don't have power to do this. And God says, I know you don't. Pat, I love you. You were never designed to run on your own power. You're always designed to run on God power. That's how I built your body. God reliance, not self-Pat reliance. Excuse me, I get excited here. Page 11, he's saying in that second paragraph, he says, you know what? I've seen some events in my life that are terrible. Don't forget, I didn't see a lot of action in World War I, but I was over there and I heard the stories about mustard gas. I heard the stories about barbed wire and no man's land and people dying for days. And no one was able to go out in no man's land to pick that guy off the barbed wire, and they had to watch him torturously die. People's skin falling off their face from mustard gas, their lungs puking up blood because of all. Brotherhood of man? Are you kidding me? Peace and harmony in the life and that God's in control of all this? Man, you don't understand. I've seen some bad stuff in life, and it's not good. And I don't believe that God is really involved in human affairs. It's negligible, if anything. In fact, if anybody, the brotherhood of man, that's a grim jest. And if there's anything, maybe there is a devil. And if there is a devil, he's the boss, not God. Look what's happened in life. See, sometimes when I'm beginning my God experience, I have a hardened heart and I can't see. I can't see what God's doing behind the scenes. I can't see the miracles that God's creating when everything in circumstance looks terrible. And see, there's this consideration, there's this meditation, there's this waiting on God as I'm learning to develop this relationship with God that becomes vital. Step 11 prayer and meditation and study of spiritual books and to get to know the God that I'm starting to form a relationship with are vital. I need spiritual food for my soul on a daily basis. Yesterday's food, I'm starving again. Monday, I'm starving at 6 o'clock this morning. I'm starving. God, let's have some God time. Fill me up. Teach me. Show me. Prepare me. So Bill's sitting there going, I don't believe in God. I mean, how can I believe? Maybe I do believe in God, but he's sure involved in people's lives. And Ebby does the most beautiful thing in the page 11. And we'll be, we're going to page 13. We'll be done. And I got a couple wrap up thoughts, but hopefully this is helping. I mean, this journey. Ebby doesn't defend God. Folks, you don't have to ever defend God. If somebody has a different belief than you do or has a different experience with God than you do, you don't have to defend your experience and make theirs wrong and yours right. It's not about that. Ebby simply says to Bill, but my friend sat before me, this page 11, the third full paragraph. But my friend sat before me and he made the point blank declaration that God had done for him what he couldn't do for himself. His human will had failed. Doctors pronounced him incurable. Society was about to lock him up. Like myself, he had admitted complete defeat. And then in effect, he'd been raised from the dead. Isn't that what God does to our hearts? Isn't that what God does to our soul? Isn't that what God does to our minds? Isn't that what God does to relationship? He raises us from the dead. He suddenly took us from the scrap heap. I'm a throwaway kid. The relationship's a throwaway. The job's a throwaway. Everything's a throwaway in my life. I have so much shame and guilt, I can't even look in the mirror. And Ebby says, I've been brought to a life better than anything I've ever known. And Bill, finally, there's this moment where the pin of light came into Bill's heart. And he says, my gosh, the power that I'm seeing in Ebby's life isn't Ebby's power, it's God's power. And I am open to that. And God will do that for each one of us. Don't think you'll miss out. You won't. God will find a pinprick in your heart. Thank you. 5 minutes. I see that. Is that right? It's about 5 minutes? 7 minutes. I got 7 minutes. All right, here we go. You guys okay? Thumbs up. You guys all with me? You're ready to fall asleep? You're all good? All right, here we go. Bill says at the bottom of page 11, he says, you know what, Ebby, I know for a fact that you have not just been inwardly reorganized. You didn't go to one more retreat center. You didn't go to one more rehab center. You didn't read one more book on self-help and 7 ways of highly effective life, or 8 ways, or 17 ways, however many ways there are today. You didn't go to some inspirational spiritual leader. Something changed in your life and you're not reorganized. You're not doing this on man's power. Dr. Young would say, and Dr. Silkworth would say, it was a power bigger than what we can produce in our synthetic knowledge. It was a God eternal power being poured into Ebby's life. In fact, so much so that Bill says he was on different footing. The foundation of his life had been completely picked up and transplanted. In fact, his roots, his heart, his mind, his will, his soul started feeding on this new nutrients, this rich, loving, powerful, forgiving soul of God. But next paragraph, Bill says on page 12, first full paragraph, I still had some prejudice. I still don't like that word God. It still causes me a little bit of antipathy. That's distaste. He wants to puke the word right out of his mouth. So the paragraph before, he's admitting and going, wow. And the next paragraph, he's going, bleh. So don't be surprised if you have this back and forth fighting kind of experience. It's natural. It's exactly where you need to be. That's what this book's trying to tell us. This story goes back and forth, back and forth. This grabbing hold and being encouraged, and then I'm scared of it and I retract. Grabbing hold, encouraged, I'm open to a little bit more, then I'm scared and I retract. Isn't that the way it is in our life? How many of you embrace change like it's the best thing in the world? I used to say I did. It was a lie. I hate change. All I want God to do is make me comfortable. I don't want change. God, just make my life good, make my finances good, make my relationship good, make my experiences with vacations good, make my physical health good. God, I don't want trouble. That's your job. Don't cause me trouble. I don't want change. You know what the weirdest thing is? I don't even want freedom. Oh, I say I do, but I'm not willing to go on the trek. I'm not willing to leave base camp and go to the high Alps, the high mountains, the Himalayas. I'm not willing to go. And God knows that. He's not shocked. He's not waiting for me to get up some self-will and Pat strength. He just says, Pat, I'll take you there myself. I'll go before you and I'll go behind you. I know we're up against the hour. Gosh, it's so good stuff though. Jump over here. Bill finally says to himself, I know that I can see creative intelligence, universal mind, spirit of nature, czar of the heavens. And Abby just simply says, what's your own concept of God? Not multiple gods. There's only one God. We talk about that and how it works. There's one God. May you find him now. That's what the book says. But what's your concept of this one God? Don't be offended by what I just said. God's big enough to be everything. There can't be multiple. It has to be just one. What's your concept? Let God take you to your concept of God. And Bill said that statement hit me hard and melted the icy intellectual mountains in whose shadow I'd shivered for years. He realized that his angst and his anger towards God wasn't doing a lick of good. Why not be open? I'll find out. I was convinced now that God, the bottom, second to the last paragraph, page 12, that God is concerned with me. If I want him enough. Well, he sort of gets that right, but not totally. God's concerned with us even if we don't concerned with him. He's always waiting. He always has the light on in the blizzard. And it's a warm, dry, wonderful barn in the middle of the night when we're freezing to death. He's there. At long last, Bill says, I saw, I felt, I believed. Scales of pride and prejudice fell from my eyes. A new view came in. I had needed and wanted God. There had been a humble willingness for him to have him with me, and he came. But soon the sense of his presence had been blotted out. This is the experience he had early on in his life. He had worldly clamors, he had ego, he had pomp, he had circumstance, he had all sorts of experiences. He says about how blind I'd been. And we'll conclude our session with this statement. Therefore, I humbly offered myself to God. As I understood him. And let him do what he wants with me. I place myself unreservedly under his care and protection. God's no longer impersonal. God is personal. He loves me. He cares for me. He directs me. I admitted for the first time that of myself, I was nothing without him. I was lost. I recognize that I'm powerless apart from God, and that God loves me enough that he takes my powerlessness and makes it powerful with his power. I ruthlessly faced my sins. Sin is a fancy word. It simply means when I made a mistake. I rebelled against God. I tried to live God on my power. Playing God didn't work. The God idea does. He's going to be my director. He's going to be my father. He's going to be my principal. He's going to be my employer. He's going to be my creator. And I became willing for my newfound friend. God is intimate. He has my back. He fights for me. He protects me. Ain't nobody touching us unless God allows it. And God will always bring something good out of it. My newfound friend can take the root and branch. I have not had a drink since. God's amazing. Enjoy this journey that you're on. We go from approach to contact to the first conscious relation with God. Then we grow and God becomes a consciousness of the presence. We experience that. And then we have a relationship with God, and then we have companionship with God. And none of it's up to you to remember these steps. None of it's up to you to try to create it. The only thing we have to do is be open and honest to approach God and ask him, God, reveal yourself to me. I love you guys. Thanks for letting me share.